Hey everybody, welcome to the third episode of the Pre-Modern Bros. And I'm Evan Pollinger. I'm joined here by Tom Metelsky.
What's up, everybody?
And we have a special guest on this episode, Nick Papaccio. Nick?
Uh, hey everyone, I'm obviously Nick. I started playing Magic at like ninth edition, I believe. So pre-modern's almost like new to me. There are a lot of cards that I've never played with before, or if I did play with them, it's in other Eternal formats like Legacy and Vintage. So I hope to bring a almost like an outsider's perspective into the format for someone who hasn't played with a lot of these cards.
Nick, what was your first deck in Legacy? Because I'm sure everyone would be happy to hear what it was.
My first Legacy deck was Manaless Dredge.
But there was one tournament you went far, I think, right?
Wait, what?
Wasn't there one tournament, like a GP or something, you went like pretty far?
Yeah, I actually I went all the way to the end of day one. If I had won that round, I would have made day two.
Damn. That's good for Manaless Dredge. That was like a really good result.
I was one of, I think, 2 people out of 1,000 people playing Manaless Dredge.
Very true.
All right. Our first topic of discussion for this episode is discussing a tier list for the format based off of, the top 64 decks that we found.
Yeah, so basically, actually, I forgot to exclude that. So it's 56 decks because the 8 extras from the gauntlet that we're going to cover this from were like brews, but we will leave them out of it. So, yeah, we can start from the top. The first deck is Aluren. So where would we rank it?
I'd say Aluren's probably tier 2.
Yep, agreed. Aluren's got that game plan where like you can't really interrupt it once it's going off, but it's probably just like not consistent enough. The mana base is like a little like inconsistent.
The mana's all over the place with Aluren.
Yeah. Next deck is Angry Ghoul. Angry Hermit, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I usually know it as Angry Hermit. So, what do you guys think?
I'm leaning towards 1.5. It's very consistent. And that's where we landed when we kind of talked about it. So, yeah, it's very consistent. I love that the Mox Diamond version is probably the best. Just like speed it up, get Hermit Druid out as fast as you can, and then like the sideboard, like Null Rods and Crumble, like you have a lot of stuff you can like get there with.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see. Next, Balancing Tings.
Tier 2.5.
Yep, that's where we landed.
No discussion needed.
No, it's awesome. It's fun to play. But it's like the mana base is so inconsistent.
I mean, the whole deck is just inconsistent.
It's definitely one of those decks that's got probably the most hoops to jump through to try to get it to work. And the land base is abysmal because it needs those crappy lands for the whole point of the deck.
Let's see. Dead Guy Ale.
I believe we said Dead Guy L was tier 1.5.
Dead Guy Ale is 2. No, wait. Where is it? 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, Nick, that's a deck you like to play a lot. Why do you think we kind of like resolved it there?
Well, I play mono black usually, but I think we resolved that Dead Guy L is simply like the better version of mono black. So yeah, it wound up in tier 2. Like it's like mono black is also in tier 2, but it's just slightly better, just like a strictly upgraded version.
Yeah, I do like having access to white though. Like you can interact with enchantments, which like mono black would fold to like elephant grass, but
Yep.
But yeah, no, I think Dead Gael, it's like it's a really good mid range deck, but again, it's just like I don't know, the mana base, like not having the fetch land is rough. Like um that kind of makes it a little bit like a little difficult.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
having access to swords in some matchups definitely gives it the edge over the mono black version of it.
Yep. All right, next deck on the list.
We're going with Devour combo. Everybody's favorite.
It's my baby.
Yep.
I didn't make the list. I didn't make the
it's-
list, but I feel like I've made the correct adjustments. I feel like the second island.
You might not have made the list, but you are the list now.
I Be True is Devour combo. I've had a bit of a rough week with it. Like a lot of people now are prepping for it, which is why it's like there's nothing wrong with the deck being in the format. Because one, it's awesome. It's the deck's never existed besides being in pre-modern. Yes, it's very powerful, but like it kind of like loses to itself at times, like most combo decks do. The mana base still is not good. You want Scalding Tarn, but you don't have it. Yeah, I mean, it's tier 1, like we agreed on, but it loses to like counter spells, Curse Totem, Null Rod, like it basically folds to them. You got to have the Rushing River. Like it's tier 1 just because it's power level alone, but very easy to interact with.
Yeah, I think the reason you had such a big success with it was partly because people weren't prepared for it properly.
No, they weren't.
It's almost like the way, Vintage and Legacy, how sometimes they just used to fold to Dredge, and it was because, well, I just didn't have the graveyard hate. I showed up with, no ley lines in my sideboard this week.
Yep.
And that's what Devour was. And I think as people slowly start to understand how powerful the deck is, but also how easily it can be interacted with through, like you said, Null Rod and Totem, it will just kind of settle at a little bit lower tier. But until that happens, I think it's still one of the best decks in the format.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree.
After the Devourer combo, we have Doomsday. And we put Doomsday at 2.5. Doomsday itself is just a rough archetype because I feel like it's just not. There's no solidified list for Doomsday. I think eventually it could find one. Not having the Storm cards is rough.
Yeah, I just go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say that's the biggest downside to it. There's
Yeah.
lots of different weird hoops that people are trying to jump through to get Doomsday to work. Obviously, it's an incredibly powerful card in it of itself, but no one's been able to kind of align all of that yet.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a little bit treading on some uncharted waters when you're going to play against like Burn and stuff like that. But the life loss is definitely relevant, even though you want to try to probably win on the same turn. But like Future Sight, Ebony Charm, it's an awesome interaction, but probably just too slow. Also, it's also rough against hand disruption. Like if you're going to play against decks that have like Duresses and Cabal Therapies, you can just like strip your hand apart. Like I don't know if the redundancy is there.
No, not really.
But what's next?
Following Doomsday, we have Draco Blast, or Machine Head, however you want to call it. We put it at tier 1.5. It's, in my opinion, the strongest Duress Cabal Therapy deck there is. It's the strongest hand disruption deck. I think it's better than Mono Black. I mean, having the combo finisher, I think gives it that it doesn't have to rely on. It's just a backup game plan is a huge plus for the deck.
Yeah, I would like you probably leave it in against most matchups. Like the matchups you would board out the combo, it's probably like counterspell decks. So because that would be terrible if you basically empty your hand on Insidious Dreams against like Landstill and they counter your engineer or the explosives card, and then you draw Draco next turn. Like that's terrible. That that's when you can bring in like the negators and stuff like that. The deck is really good.
Potentially, I think even Green, White, Enchantress, some of them do run Ivory Mask in the sideboard.
Yeah, that could be an issue. But yeah, I feel like 1.5 makes sense.
And then following that, we have Elves, which we put Elves at tier 2. The deck isn't terrible, can run out of steam. It also has the games where it just completely runs away with it. It has Symbiote to be able to dodge spot removal, which is ridiculously strong against a lot of decks. But anything that has any kind of a board clear or any kind of 2-for-1 removal, it just can't keep up.
Yep. Yeah, I don't think much more to say. Like, again, we talked about it before we started recording. Like, you got to know if you're playing against elves, you can lose to it if you make the wrong moves. So, like, if you don't kill the symbiote, you are probably going to be in trouble. And then, like Quirion Ranger, like the important ones, like you don't want to be bolting their mana dorks. Like, that's not what you want to be doing. Usually, good elves players will like kind of bait you into that. But you need to know what to remove, and go from there. All right, what's the next one?
The next one on the list is Green, White, Enchantress, which, in my opinion, out of the Enchantress decks, it's the better. It's put up a ton of results recently. It is incredibly consistent. It can operate on many different axes in terms of its defense and interaction with other decks. You know, it has like Elephant Grass for the aggro decks and Propaganda if it needed it, because I think it does have access to some blue depending on the lists. Some of them splash it. Like I said earlier, Ivory Mask for the burn decks. It has Warmth, Chill. Sometimes it'll sideboard the blue. It's a very, very consistent deck, and we put it in tier 1.
Yep, I play it. Actually, I haven't played against it in a while on the Moto tournaments, but there is one guy that plays it week in and week out. Usually does well. It's like one of those decks. It's like I hate playing against it. It is very consistent.
Yeah.
And then the next one, Evan, is just like the blue-green version.
This is it's the same archetype, but it operates completely differently by using like Cloud of Fairies to get extra value out of their like Sanctum and stuff like that. It's definitely a weaker version, and that's why we put this one in 2.5.
Yeah, I think there's a significant drop off.
Yeah, I don't really see the appeal of playing blue green over green white in this one. It just seems like white has your better cards for the archetype.
Oh yeah, and like your win condition can be like the Sacred Mesa. Like that card's so good in the deck.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then following blue green Enchantress, we have Esper Control, which we also put at 2.5. It to me felt like the worst control deck versus Bant or 4-color. I don't really know. I mean, I know you get some stuff out of running Esper with Shadow Mage Infiltrator and Duress and a couple others, and Duress is probably one of the best cards in the format, but this doesn't feel like it actually helps this deck by running it.
No. Yeah, we don't have to spend too much time on this one. What you just kind of outlined makes a lot of sense.
And then following Esper Control, we have Fluctuator, which we also
everyone's favorite, man. You can't just walk away and talking all like calmly about Fluctuator. You got to get pumped up about Fluctuator.
I mean, Fluctuator is the insta win. You know, your opponent in game 1 basically can't interact with you, so you just auto win that game. But then game 2 and 3, you pretty much lose.
Yeah, we threw it in 2.5. Wait, we said it is the vintage. It's the pre-modern dredge, like equivalent. Like you win game 1 probably like above 75% of the time.
Yeah.
The only times I feel like you're not going to win game one is if you don't have your fluctuator draw. But yeah, the deck is awesome though. I don't know if that deck ever existed. I'm not sure.
That I don't know.
Yeah, no idea.
After this, I want to look more into that. But what's next?
And then following Fluctuator, we have Full English Breakfast, which we put in tier 1.5. It is a combo deck, a mid-range deck. It operates and can attack many different ways. I mean, it does get hosed pretty hard by Humility. Humility is definitely not a card it wants to see, but it can win with combat, without combat. You know, it can use Devourer to win, and then Triskelion. It's can attack with a phage and one-shot someone with a phage. I mean, it does so many things. It's one of the most skill-intensive decks to play in the format because of all of these different lines that you constantly have at every decision point.
No, it's definitely, I agree. There's so many lines. Like, honestly, like if someone wrote like a primer on this deck, that would be sweet. Like, I think there's so many different lines. And then like it's just like not the clean lines. You got to, like, there's going to be different lines too in different like circumstances. Like, it's crazy. And this is also a deck that never existed, which is kind of cool. So
yeah,
it's just like more of the exciting things that pre-modern brings, like decks that never existed and then that are basically be like 1 and 1.5 tiers. Like, that's insane because anyone can make like a tier 2.5 deck. Like, but is it going to have game, and is it going to have, like, is it going to be sustainable and like be able to make a presence in the format? And Full English Breakfast did. Like, the deck is so good. It's so close probably to tier 1. I think the only thing that we discussed were held back from tier 1 is just like it's hard to play and the results aren't always there. But
And the land base is a little shaky. I mean, it runs a
true.
lot of multicolored
Yeah.
lands. It's very susceptible to stuff like that. I mean, like if you're somebody who can get the wastelands, it's rough. Or Dust Bowl, whatever, depending on the timing of the game.
Yeah. Well, Evan, the next ones, you want to just we can cover them together, even though we ranked them.
Okay. Well, so back to back, we have two different versions of goblins. We have black-red goblins and green-red goblins. Earlier, it was black-red, and that was it. And the deck was very good. I mean, goblins as an archetype itself was relatively strong. Then green-red came out as more of a necessity because it needed to have access to naturalize to be able to, you know, respond to stuff like chill post sideboard, or mainly with the rise of Enchantress is one of the big reasons.
Yeah.
Black red, because it's now a little bit weaker, we put it tier 2, and green red with it having access to naturalize or some spicy tech in the sideboard for Sylvan for the mid-range matchups, we put that at 1.5.
Yep, agreed. Never played black-red goblins, but the red-green ones. I think I went 5-1 in the September monthly, and I lost to Jared Doucette on Terrageddon. That's a bad matchup. But the red-green one is, I mean, they're all basically mono red until sideboarding, but the green is definitely important. Like naturalize, tranquil domain. Like you want the enchantment removal. If you're like in a paper, let's just say there was like a paper tournament again, and you know the meta is going to be heavy in combo, probably would lean towards more black red because you want to rest. But I think you're safer with red green.
Well, like I said, a lot of that, I mean, Enchantress has just been on a steady rise for a while. And with that rise, it just, the necessity for enchantment removal increases.
Yep.
And then behind that, we have Groatog.
Awesome deck.
Which we put at tier 2.5. And if anyone's not familiar, the grow part is referencing Quirion Dryad. So this is a bug deck. Like a bug, kind of like a mid-range sort of tempo deck.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have any, like a ton of results to kind of warrant it being any higher than a 2.5 deck. It's definitely worse than regular Psychotog, I feel. I don't think you gain a whole lot by adding in green. I feel like you kind of dilute the deck a little too much.
Yeah, I agree. It's cool, like, again, the early starts with Mox Diamond and stuff, but it's just, I don't know. It's like a little inconsistent. If you're going to play, like, you'd rather just play the blue-black Psychotog.
Yeah, as much as I like Quirion Dryad, I don't believe that it belongs paired up with Psychotog in a deck. I just don't think that's the proper. I don't think the proper deck for the both of them to exist in.
Yeah, I mean, so far though, trying to make it on our list here, it is no easy task to get in that 1.51 level.
Nope.
It's true. We were definitely pretty rough on these. We took this serious.
Absolutely. Well, some of these decks, again, you're pushing like the fringe playability. Like, why would you play blue green Enchantress over the green white one? Like, just because you like some of the cards in it, maybe. But if you want to like win a tournament or like have a better shot at it, you stick with the green white one, because
Yeah.
you have better cards in the deck. So again, I think the format probably we'll look at the end of the list, but the format probably has like 20, like a solid 20 to 25 decks that could probably like win a tournament. Which
Well,
is
at any point with the right matchups, any deck that's even in tier 2.5 can
absolutely. Yeah, I think
easily just go through.
Yeah, I think Fluctuator, before we got into the format, I think Fluctuator won one of the monthlies.
He did, yes.
That's ridiculous. Again, like if he probably just dodged a ton of hand disruption, or I mean, again, there's variance in luck and magic. They can strip that from you, and then you draw one. Like, or you know what I mean? Like, so many different things can happen. That's why the game's amazing. What's next?
So following Growatog, we have Green White Oath, which we put at tier 2, or Tron Oath, however you want to, describe it. I feel like it's probably the slowest and weakest version of Oath. I don't think it's particularly good. I would like, we talked about this earlier, me personally, I would like to see some sort of like a powder keg version or a Nev's disc version to be able to give it that better matchup for the mid-range decks, for the aggro decks, so that it doesn't just get run over. Because I feel like that's where you should be getting better by slowing the deck down to try to run Tron, that you're not getting. You're running, I understand the necessity to run like eggs as color fixers and a couple other things, but you're slowing the deck down instead of playing like Golden Gun. You're slowing the deck down by playing Tron to be able to hard cast your creatures, but you're not picking up like that O-Stone type of card that Modern has, Modern Tron.
Yeah, exactly. Again, I think they run like Moments Peace, stuff like that, but like it's not, you can't really like weigh in heavily on that.
No.
And it's going to fold to like quicker combo too.
Yeah. I mean, being green-white, it does not have a lot of responses to any other combo decks. I mean, it does have swords for creatures, but that's about it.
Yep.
And then following Green-White Oath, we have lands, which we put at tier 2.5.
Yeah, I think Flint, one of the guys that he kind of like organized the 64 deck gauntlet with Michael Arnold. I think he made lands in the format in the format. It seems strong, but again, I don't know if a lot of people don't play it because it looks like it looks difficult to play. But when we kind of like just referenced the lists and went from there, like I don't know if the consistency's not there, but I could see it just like having some bad matchups. And again, I think you might lose to yourself a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just one of those decks that doesn't also have a lot of results to put up to prove where it should be above this.
Yeah.
If more people were playing it, or the people who are playing it, have more matches under their belt, there's a chance that it could continue to go up, because obviously it's going to be a hard deck to interact with.
Yep.
Operating on a completely different axis than everybody else. But it's just one of those things that until that happens, this is kind of where it sits.
Yep, agreed.
And then following lands, we have my deck, which is Landstill, which we put at tier 1. And that was an unbiased tier 1.
Yeah.
It is, since I've been playing the format now, it has just been it's definitely the most consistent blue deck I've seen. It is like I said, it's one of those decks that attacks on a different axes than everybody else. I mean, being able to lock your opponent under a standstill and then just, go to town with Mishra's Factories. It's a special feeling.
This is like your style, man. Like in Vintage, you like land still.
Yeah.
And now it's actually playable because in Vintage it's unplayable.
I mean, hey, it's pushing Legacy real hard right now too. So Sharknado it up.
True. Standstill is so strong. If played correctly, the card is so good.
Yeah, Landstill's one of those decks that I think is only going to get better the more that people play it. I don't think it's ever really going to go away as a tier 1 deck.
Yeah, there's a deck we didn't talk about yet, but Landstill or that deck are probably the best in the format, in my opinion. Just when it comes to consistency, like redundancy, like those things are big in Magic, I feel like. So, but Landstill is awesome. I also love piloting Landstill. It's so much fun. So many lines of play. Plus, you get to play like one of the strongest cards in the format, Fact or Fiction. It's so good.
It's true.
What do we got next?
Following Landstill, we have Legion Landloss, which we put at tier 2. It's not a super old deck. It's relatively new. It has some varied results, but not anything that really kind of proves it to be higher than this. It does have its matchups where, obviously the land destruction is going to be super relevant. But unfortunately, there's also a lot of decks where land destruction is not relevant. Sly and Reanimator and Devourer do not need a lot of resources to operate on. Oath, same thing. These are decks that can operate on very little resources, and it'll be too late by the time the land destruction becomes relevant.
Yeah, that's what holds it back. I think this holds kind of like the Ponza land destruction decks back is like you're not doing what your game plan is well against the decks that like don't need the resources. So like this, when we tested this deck against Landstill, like we saw like Landstill struggled because it needs its resources. It needs to hit its land drops. Like,
yeah,
the deck probably just exists because it's really good against Landstill. But
probably.
Yeah.
But there's decks like Draco Blast and like that needs its resources too. Like that'll probably have a bad matchup against like Legion Landloss. So, or like Goblins because they don't have Vial. Like they need their lands.
I mean, any deck also that's going to have a shaky land base gets to prey on those decks.
Yep.
Full English Breakfast, which is running a bunch of different rainbow lands, and they destroy their own lands sometimes. With Gemstone,
Yep.
Those are the decks it gets to prey on, and that's why it exists in this format.
What is the next one?
Life, which we put at tier 2.
I love this deck, but it's just I don't know. It's like the consistency, but it when it goes like again, most decks can't beat life like infinite life.
I mean, if it goes off, it wins. There's almost nobody who can, like you just said, can handle an infinite life gain.
Yep.
But it is a lot of hoops to jump through to get that combo off.
Yeah. Plus, you're just playing like a bunch of like I don't know, like bad creatures, like all the the card Task Force, like and the Encores, like they're not good cards. So if you're like not drawing the right pieces, you're basically not doing anything. It's nice you get like the Living Wish package, but the deck really doesn't do much. Like you know what I mean? Like it's like not doing anything. You're not going to win with your 0-1 and 1-2s by attacking.
I mean, you don't even win by gaining infinite life, technically.
True. It is a cool deck, though. I don't think that deck's. I think it's only existed in pre-modern as well.
Yeah.
Nick, you have anything to add on that one?
Not really, no. It doesn't seem like it has too much going for it. as we just said, gaining infinite life doesn't win you the game.
Yeah.
There are plenty of other decks that just frankly do not care about you gaining that much life.
You can still lose to a phage.
Evan, what's next? And wait, the race is getting hot over here. Look at 2 and 2.5.
A lot of bad decks in this format.
Well, we're about to throw it off because we've got Mana Flare Storm, which is coming in hot at 2.5.
Yeah, wait. I think I think this is the deck we spent the least amount of time on, just because like the results aren't there. Even though we said the deck is pretty cool and it's innovative, but
look, most of these decks are cool and innovative.
Yeah.
I mean, I love seeing any of these deck lists. I mean, who the heck would have thought, balancing things was something that people would ever be playing? But it's super neat. But look, it still isn't that good.
No, wait. That's why this is what attracted me to the format from the get-go. Was like, whoa, these are decks like you've never like seen before, and if you have like just the cards in them, like you never get to play with anymore. Like you can't play with Massacre anywhere else.
No.
Like it's just so cool that, like you said, every deck in this format like interests me. Some decks I don't like to play against, like Greenway Enchantress and stuff like that. But like it is so like they're so unique, and like again, you get to play with cards you weren't able to play with until like you had to play with these like 15 years ago when you were a kid, like Kitchen Table Magic, and now you get to play with them again. But Mana Flare combo, oh man, it's not looking good.
Nope.
We're moving on.
Well, as a funny segue for decks that you don't see in any other formats and have not been around forever, Merfolk.
Our buddy Joel won a tournament, won Vintage Champs with Merfolk once, and
he did.
It did nothing ever again.
Nope. We put it in tier 2. It is a deck right now for this format, which is currently, I feel like, picking up steam. It has some results and a lot of people's interest in the archetype that are, I think, going to help fuel that. There is a chance that this could climb. There's a chance that people could realize it's not that good and it could fall. But for right now, tier 2 is kind of more in the middle of the format. It has a lot of stuff going for it, and all it takes is like one, random merfolk that everyone kind of passed over, and all of a sudden it, busts out.
Well, yeah, I like decks like this too, where it's like aggro control, and then like it has no problem running like the null rods in the sideboard. Like it fits so good in decks like this or goblins.
And it also runs 19 islands, and that's it.
Wait, this deck wants Mutavault so bad.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah, Mixer's Factory is not Mutavault for this type of deck. Even though Factory's probably better, but oh man, if Mutavault was in the format, this deck would be so much better.
I mean, who knows? Maybe going with Factory is the way this deck should be going, to just give it that extra edge for stuff to be attacking with. You never know. Like I said, this is a relatively new archetype for this format, and all it takes is some people showing some interest in it, and the sky's the limit. Who knows? Maybe this is a standstill deck.
True. Wait, I'm making a note.
Nobody knows.
I'm making a note right now. I have Merfolk - add factories. Because I want to try that for sure. All right, what is next?
Behind Merfolk, now that we've balanced out tier 2 and 2.5, behind Merfolk we have Mud coming in at tier 2.
I so bad want to put this at 1.5, but the times we've played it and the times I played against it, oh man, it's just, which is a good thing, because like when Vintage Shops was like in its heyday, which is not really at anymore, like so miserable to play against, but like Metalworker is so strong. I think the one time I was playing against a guy, he had like 10, he had turn 2 Metalworker, turn 3 10 mana. And I did lose.
He dropped his whole hand. I was watching that game. He dropped his entire hand the turn that Metalworker didn't have summoning sickness.
Yes, but then there are like the games where that doesn't do anything, and like Sphere. Some decks don't like. There's not like combo decks don't like Sphere of Resistance, but like some decks don't really care.
Yeah.
But yeah, Nick, anything else to add? Why it's 2.0?
I just think that Mud doesn't have a lot of the tools that actually put it over the top. Artifacts got better and better and better as Magic continued to exist, and this version of Mud just does not have access to a lot of those tools that just make it a broken deck.
Exactly. Yeah. Wait, Massacre and like Phyrexian Processor and Karn, like, yeah, they're cool, but they aren't Wormcoil Engine.
Exactly.
That would be insane if it had Wormcoil Engine.
Or Lodestone Golem, or Thorn of Amethyst, or Trinisphere.
Oh man! All right,
Fucking
let's move on.
Yes.
And then following Mud, we have Pattern Rector, which we put at tier 2.5.
One of my favorite decks, but it's not good.
It's again a ton of hoops. You have to set up so much stuff to be able to get this thing to go off, and it's just not. At that point, your opponent's done so many different things, either to interact with you or to not, and just punch you in the face.
Yeah.
It's just not there.
It's cool though. It plays Veteran Explorer and Cabal Therapy, so who doesn't like that combo? Like, I think what's the Legacy deck? Nick Fit.
Yeah.
That runs that style of, so it's basically like Nick Fit with a combo finish, which is kind of cool, but it's just not strong enough. What do we got next?
Behind that, we have Pink Prison, which we also put at tier 2.5.
Another cool deck, but we don't have to talk about too much. It's just, wait, what's the better version we were talking about?
I don't remember. Stasis?
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. I can't remember. I think Nick, you mentioned it. Like, there's like a better version of Pink Prison.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. I can't even remember what's in Pink Prison because
so much like
it just seems like such an inconsequential deck to the format.
Yeah. What's next?
Behind that, we have Ponza, which we felt was worse than Legion Land Loss, and we put that one at 2.5. It felt like the worst version of like the worst land destruction deck out of the two.
Yep. I like the red splash, like you can like get Stone Rain now, and if you wanted to play Blood Moon, and you could play the Avalanche Riders, but I don't think you need it. Again, if you play either one, you'll do fine, but I don't know. I just think the mono green one's better. What is next?
Behind Ponza, we have Pox, which we put at tier 2.
I have this deck going to the finals of the 64-player gauntlet. It's not because like, oh my god, the deck's broken. It's like the next big thing, but the matchups just lined up good in my eyes. What I saw like in the bracket, but I think Pox is underplayed and it's really strong. Like it's definitely underplayed. There's another deck that's underplayed, which we'll get to in a little bit, and I'll bring that up. But Pox is pretty good. But 2.0 or tier 2 seems good.
Yeah. Pox is another one of those decks that seems like the more that people play it, like a lot of decks in this format, the more that people play it, the more the list will get refined and the better it'll get.
Yeah, as the format grows, all lists will get refined. Some decks you might not see anymore because it's like, okay, this is not playable. But again, with a format so wide open, I don't even know if you can really like knock decks out of the format. Like it's not like it's too open, you know?
I don't know. I think Balancing Things can go.
Oh man, what is next?
Behind Pox, we have Psychotog, which is just the straight blue-black version, which we felt was better than Groatog, and we put this one at tier 2.
Yeah, what holds it back? It's this and Devour combo are my favorite decks in the format to play. Like tempo combo, and control here and there, but like to Psychotog, it's blue black what holds it back. I saw some lists that are mainly hard focused on mono blue, and you're just playing black for Psychotog, and you're playing like Cunning Wish for some black removal, duress. Like I think that actually is probably the best version. I think the Shadow Mage Infiltrator ones are too slow, and like clunky. So like you basically just like control the board, land the Psychotog, and then try to win like the next turn.
I mean, it is also, I think, the only deck in the entire format that runs Lobotomy.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Which is a fantastic card for the format.
Yeah. Wait, it's like one of the only decks, too, that runs like I see it. I started putting it in the sideboard when I started playing the format because I started with Psychotog. I started playing Nev's Disc. That card's underplayed.
Hey, I said it should be in Tron.
Yeah. Yeah, underplayed cards is another discussion. We should have it at some point. But yeah, Psychotog 2 point.
Yeah, definitely.
Tier 2. It can win a tournament though, but it's just again, just it runs. And it folds to Landstill. Like you have to have so many things go right for you to beat Landstill. It is a bad matchup.
Well, it's also not very threat heavy. So Landstill
Yes.
having Wraths and having Swords to Plowshares plus the counter magic to fight your counter magic,
Yep.
it's a dicey situation.
Yeah. What's next?
Behind Psychotog, we have Reanimator, and we put Reanimator at 1.5. It's just one of those decks that it doesn't need a lot of resources like we talked about earlier to operate, so it has a lot of really good matchups. And, putting out an early monster threat that a lot of the mid-range decks can't answer is enough. That's all it takes.
And if you had Entomb in the format, it would be tier 1 in a heartbeat. It'd probably be the best
instantly. Instantly. In all honesty, that's especially with Dark Ritual existing in this format and Lotus Petal. I mean, if you have Entomb, the deck just takes off. I mean, turn 1, you're staring at a Phantom Neshoba or a Chroma. Most decks auto lose.
Yep.
Sorry, Goblins, you're not beating a Chroma.
Exactly. What's next?
Behind Reanimator, we have Rebels, which we put at tier 2.
Yeah, sweet deck. I mean, you need to run the lands. Like, you have to play blue-white for the standstill. Like, you just can't play old school style. Like,
well, Meddling Mage does a lot of heavy lifting for you.
Correct. Yeah. And Mother of Runes, like, it's changed a lot since, like, the old standard deck back in, like, the early 2000s. But, like you said, you need to adjust. I think the decks, like, there's some decks it, like, just trounces on, and there's some it can't beat. But
it's very similar to like a Death and Taxes for this format, where you have stuff like Whipcorder to take care of like Reanimator, and you have a bunch of creatures that can tutor up your Whipcorder, and all of a sudden Reanimator can't get through with their Neshobas or their Chromas or whatever it is. Oath is going to struggle with it because it can't handle those types of threats.
No, exactly. Nick, anything else for Rebels before we go to the next one?
Rebels seems like it's a good archetype that can't really compete with a lot of the top decks in the format. Like it definitely outclasses a lot of different decks that we have in tier 2. But once you start getting into like tier 1, tier 1.5, it's like, how does this deck deal with like Dracoblast? How does it deal with Landstill? How does it deal with Enchantress?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's got like in the tier 2 class here, it looks like it might beat some of these decks one-on-one, but yeah, when you start getting like, let's say you're in a tournament and you have Rebels, you're 4-0. If you start seeing like these decks at the top table, 1 and 1.5, you're gonna have some trouble.
Exactly. Once you start knocking out your tier 2 matchups and you start going against your higher placing combo decks or like Landstill, you're just not going to be able to keep up with them.
Yeah, no, not to say you're like not gonna see a Doomsday or like a Fluctuator in like the 5-0 or 6-0 bracket, but like you're not gonna see 6 of them where you might see 6 Landstills. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
exactly.
All right, what do we get next?
Behind Rebels, we have Recycle Cheerios, which we put at tier 2.5.
Yeah, cool deck, just not consistent enough.
Again, it's one of those decks that's it's a lot of hoops to jump through.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of setup, and you might not necessarily have that against a deck that is either very aggressive or a deck that has a lot of interaction, whether it's through hand disruption or counter magic.
Exactly. Next,
we have Replenish Opalescence at tier 2. Blue-white Replenish, whatever you want to call it. It's again another deck. It's if it goes off, you're gonna win. Your opponent's gonna have no permanents on the battlefield. You're gonna exile all their lands. You're gonna exile all their creatures, and then you're gonna hit them for 20. But you need to find Replenish, and you need to find Opalescence, and you have to find 2 or 3 other enchantments in order to win.
Exactly. It's just I love the addition of Squee. Like it's so good in the deck, and then like Frantic Search being unbanned like a while ago, like made the deck better, but it's bad against Tormod's. Like you can't see Tormod's script basically.
This is not a deck that can hard cast all of their enchantments to try to dodge the graveyard like a Reanimator deck or an Oath deck. Something that or Angry Ghoul, where they're operating on the battlefield and out of their graveyard simultaneously. This doesn't have that option. This is kind of all in. Following the blue-white Replenish Opalescence deck, we have Replenish Panda Burst. We put it at tier 2.5. I don't have a ton of familiarity with this deck, but it's definitely, in terms of the Replenish decks, the worst one. It's worse than the Opalescence deck. It's not an Enchantress deck, but I know Green White Enchantress also runs Replenish, and that one is, we put it in tier 1 for a reason. I don't know. Do you have anything else to say about it?
I feel like this is similar to a blue-green Enchantress, where I feel like you're just taking out better cards for worse cards, just fundamentally making a worse deck.
Yeah, unfortunately, being compared to another version of the deck which is consistently better is difficult. I understand, wanting to innovate and try new things, but this is one of those things that kind of failed.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with experimenting with an archetype, but sometimes you just go in the wrong direction. What are we looking at next on the list?
Next on the list, we have arguably one of the best, if not the best deck in the format, which is the Rock. I mean, it's tier 1. It has consistently put up some of the best results in the format. It is the most consistent deck in the format. It's definitely the best mid-range creature deck in the format. It's a monster.
Yeah, the deck is definitely insane. It has access to near perfect mana. I would say it gets access to a lot of the best green cards that you can even run in the format, in my opinion. Like, you're running a 4 of with Birds of Paradise, 4 of Wall of Blossoms. You get a ton of gas out of Pernicious Deed and other things like that. On top of it being a Duressing Cabal Therapy deck. And we've already talked about how good those cards are.
It's a deck that can operate on almost every axis in the format without over investing in it, but they can go pretty deep in it. For the aggro decks, like you said, they have Pernicious Deed. For the mid-range and wide decks. For the burn decks, they have access to the Beast, whatchamacallit?
You're talking about Ravenous Baloth?
Ravenous Baloth and Recurring Nightmare combo, so that they can suddenly just gain life through all of the burn and get to a life total that your opponent can no longer kill you. It is just, and you have like you said, Duress Cabal Therapy for the control decks, for the combo decks. At the same time, you're getting an undercosted threat that you also get a ton of value out of, like Blastoderm. Yep. It does so much for this format. In this format, I don't know about for the format. It's definitely the boogeyman. It's it's Jund on steroids basically for this. Jund in every other format, modern, has been like the solid middle of the road staple that can it beat Jund. Well, this is Jund that just beats everything else.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't even get to talk about like the fact that this deck can get away with running Living Wish pretty consistent, pretty well.
There is a version of it that runs survival. There's a version that runs no survival, and then there's a version that instead of survival, it runs Living Wish.
Yeah, so you don't even know necessarily. Not only is it a tier 1 deck in all 3 forms, but sitting down against it, you may not even know which one you're going against, which is even scarier to think about. So it definitely deserves place in tier 1.
I also wish Putrid Leech was in the format, because that would be sick.
That would be very good.
And then following the Rock, we have another heater, Sly, coming in also at tier 1. Sly,
everyone's favorite deck.
Everyone's favorite. Look, if you don't want to see the Rock on the other side of the table, clearly you want to see Sly on the other side of the table. I mean, it is the best aggressive deck in the format, hands down. It, again, is one of those decks that can use combat with their aggressive undercosted creatures while also having a suite of burn spells to either clear the way or just throw at your face before you can even really have a chance to blink. I mean, next thing you know, you're going to get bolted and then fire blasted, and oh, there's a third of my life gone.
Yeah, the deck definitely seems like it has a ton of gas. That it can just go very hard very quickly.
And then following Sly, we have Squirrel Opposition, which we put at tier 2.
I mean, this is a really cool deck. I mean, it just doesn't seem like it has enough gas to just really push its way past tier 2.
Wait, it's one of those decks like Allurin. When it gets going, it's probably game over. But there's a lot of setup with Squirrel Opposition. But Opposition's so strong. Like, what a good card. I just don't think it's like good enough. Like, it doesn't have enough pieces that make it consistent in the format.
There's some arguments that the better version of Opposition might actually be the Wild Mongrel Basking Root Walla version, because they can pump out creatures so quickly. And that also uses Opposition to the fullest to just lock your opponent out of the game.
Oh yeah, exactly. What is next?
Following Squirrel Opposition, we have Stasis, which we put at tier 1.5. It's the best lockout deck. It's the best prison deck. I don't know what it would take for it to be pushed to tier 1. It struggles with the aggressive matchups. It struggles with stuff like Burn. I mean, Burn getting stuff like Fire Blast, which even if their lands are tapped, is a free counter, a free burn spell. All their, a lot of their burns, aggressive creatures and burn spells costing, 1 mana, 2 mana is a problem.
Yeah, I think Stasis is like, it's hard to play too. But again, if you like make one mistake with Stasis, you could probably just lose the game. That's probably what holds it back from like winning more. But it is an awesome deck. And then Stasis Legal, who doesn't like playing against? You can't not like playing against Stasis. Come on.
Definitely a fun matchup.
Come on, once you see the Stasis and what's the land called it combos with? Forsaken City.
Yeah.
Once that's going, it's basically over.
Yeah, I'm sure people would be absolutely thrilled if Stasis became a tier 1 deck and they had to see 3 or 4 copies of it in the top rounds. Following Stasis, we have Esper Stiflenought, which we put at tier 1. It's, in my opinion, the best version of Stiflenought. I know there is some other versions that exist. I think having access to the hand disruption on black, having access to Meddling Mage. I know, Tom, you've had a lot of success with Stiflenought. And, just like Devour, it's, one of the decks that you're known for.
Oh, yeah, man. I think I told you before, Stiflenought plays like Delver a little bit. So that's like, I played Delver since it was printed. Before I stopped playing Legacy a couple months ago, it like basically plays that same like game plan and concept. So like tempo control. I think it's still the best Days deck in the format. It's just so good. And then it's hard to answer a Stiflenought when it resolves.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's one of those decks that doesn't need a lot of resources to operate on. And on top of it, then the way the mulligan rules are structured now drastically helps this deck. I mean, this deck can aggressively try to mulligan for those early potentially even a turn 1 Stifle Knot without any real downside depending on the matchups. If you're playing against Sly and you go for a turn 1, I'm just going to mull to, land, Lotus Petal, Dreadnought, Vision Charm or Stifle. You have the combo on turn 1 and your opponent's not going to be able to interact with you, and you have this big giant creature that's going to 2-shot them.
Yeah, the deck also has a lot of versatility because it's so consistent. It can get away with running like, an Unearth or Lindell's Vault. There's a lot of different things that you can kind of slot in. I also think that because of its main board consistency, you can do a lot with its sideboard as well.
Well, yeah, what I've been doing is, because you have Enlightened Tutor, I added more, like instead of playing like Hydroblast, which I saw some decks doing, it's like, but you have Enlightened Tutor, so it's probably just better to run like the Chill package and then Seal of Cleansing, because you can search them up. So it's basically like you can tutor for your removal spells, which is nice. And then Meddling Mage is so strong. That's one of the best cards in the format. Again, we talked about doing it before. A top 5 list, Meddling Mage is so good.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, any deck that it's in, Rebels, stuff like this, it's in there for a reason. And it's in there to do a lot of it's this more or less the spine of the deck. It does all of the heavy lifting. Following the Esper Stifle Knot, we have Blue-Green Stifle Knot, which we put at tier 2. We, felt it was the weaker version. I mean, I understand that in order for it to deal with the mid-range, the aggressive decks, not, when you don't have the Dreadnought, to not just get run over, to take 8 damage from a Jackal Pup, they wanted to run Nimble Mongoose as a way to kind of stem the bleeding, kind of clog up the board a little bit. And it dilutes the deck and makes it a little bit worse. I mean, we talked about how good, Meddling Mage was. We already know Duress is one of the best cards in the format, and you're forfeiting those.
But that's the thing. Like, you're giving up a lot for what the blue, white, black version runs. Like, I don't know if I would ever run the blue, green one. It's a little bit for different play style too, but yeah, the blue, black, white one is probably, it just outclasses it in my opinion. I do like the blue, green version, but like I would just, it comes to that point where it's like, why would you not run the blue, white, black one?
And I know that there's people who feel otherwise. There's a lot of people that, they're in the camp of not necessarily feeling that there is a defined best version of the, Stifle Knot deck. But for us, we were kind of unanimously agreed that the Esper version is the best one. It definitely has the best results to back it up. That's for sure.
Yep, exactly. What is next?
Following Blue-Green Stifle Knot, we have Stompy, which we put at tier 2.5. It's not aggressive enough. It tries to play more of like a mid-range deck. And unfortunately, you're also playing in a format in the mid-range area of the format where the Rock exists. And the Rock is just going to completely destroy you.
Yeah, that's one thing. Also, like, I don't know, Elves is just, even though they're different decks, Elves is better. You're going to play mono green, go with Elves. It's a combo deck. It's faster. It's more resilient. Like, I would just play Elves, like, if that makes sense. Like, I think they both play Cradle too. It's just Elves is better.
As far as I know, I also think Mono Green Stompy, if you're not playing Cradle, is the most budget deck in the whole format.
I mean, that sounds right, as long as you're not running Cradle, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, just running a bunch of like mid-range green creatures and Rancors.
Yeah, I don't think you have to, like, I don't think a deck has to run Cradle. Again, I'm not sure if it does fully. Not that it would change where it's at in a tier, but it's just, yeah, I think you're right. It's probably it's maybe one of the top budget lists, but Yeah, I don't think you're going to be winning much playing
But
Stompy.
No.
yeah, but even for a budget list, I would much rather see, like, if anyone was to come to me and pick a budget list, I would never tell them to play Stompy. You're just gonna have a bad time.
I mean, at that point, I know lackeys are. Granted, I don't know how much they are exactly right now, but last time I looked, they were about $10 a piece. Like, if you're going to play a budget list, wouldn't you just play, you know, for under $100? You could probably put together all of goblins and have both versions, red black or green red, and then you have arguably like one of like probably the second best or third best mid range decks in the format.
Yeah, the most expensive stuff from Goblins is, like you said, the land. Oh no, the lackeys and the lands, like the
Yeah.
Pusan Forest and the Sulphur Springs. They're like all like between $10 and $15, I think. So
Yeah.
it's not that bad, like compared to some of the other decks. But yeah, I would definitely offer something else over Stompy. What's next?
Behind Stompy, we have coming in Suicide Black at 2.5.
Yeah, get that out of here.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of discussion we have to have. It's just worse than every other aggressive deck. It's worse than every other, mid-range deck. It doesn't help itself, that's for sure.
No, this is another one of those. Why are you playing this over that? Like, why play Suicide Black over Mono Black? I just don't understand the appeal.
And then following Suicide Black, we have Terrageddon at tier 2. Unfortunately, it's very similar to Legion Landloss. There's a lot of decks that do not need a lot of resources to operate, and that's kind of what punishes this deck in particular. I've seen decks that have gone off with the Terravore and Armageddon and still lose because their opponents just didn't care.
Yeah, like the low resource decks, like you talked about with a couple other matchups and decks, was like they're not going to really care. So like if like Angry Ghouls lined up against like Terrageddon, it's not like Armageddon is almost dead. And then but where it's good at is like against Landstill. Like Landstill wants the resources, they want to hit their land drops. Like you just get that like ebb and flow of what it's good against, and it's just because of that inconsistency with the matchups and like what is your game plan good or not good against. It's like that tier 2 level. Plus green white is a little weak. Like the Enchantress deck, like in that color pie, like just outclasses it, like with card advantage and stuff. You need like the land tax scroll rack engine going, where you're kind of like just top decking.
Yeah, you don't have a lot going for you. I mean, you're locked in those colors where your resources you don't have a lot. Coming in behind Terrageddon, we have 3 Deuce, which we put at tier 2.5. I mean, I didn't even know what this was until we looked at this list. It doesn't really have. I consistently look at like tournament results and stuff, and I haven't seen anything that it's put up. Tom, do you have anything to say about it?
Nah, I think there's a guy. He played a couple times in the Moto tournaments. I don't think he's ever done better than 3-1. I could be wrong. He might have a 4-0, but yeah, I mean it's good though. Like it kind of plays like the modern. Remember like the Nah, it's not the same actually. I was gonna say, remember Counter Cat from Modern back when like Modern became a format? Like
The first Modern Pro Tour.
yeah, like it's not obviously playing. It's not Bant, so it's not playing counter spells, but it's like just like that aggro Naya, like Wild Nakatl style, like just beat down. There's some games where like it's hard to interact with and they're just gonna win, but just not consistent enough. And then the land base is really what hurts too. Like your mana base is kind of what you might just lose to that sometimes.
Mhm.
But we can move on.
Behind 3 Deuce, we have Tinker Stacks, which we also put in tier 2.5.
Yeah, this one there's just like Devour's a better Tinker deck. Like there's some things this does that like will just win the games better than like Mud and like Devour, but I don't know. Like Devour's like Tinker. I'd rather just play Mud. Like I don't know.
I feel like Stacks is just too slow. Like Smokestack in general in this format is just too low. Or too slow, I'm sorry. A lot of decks just either don't care or they are going to have too much time to respond to it.
Yeah, I just don't feel like Stacks has a lot going for it here.
And then following Tinker Stacks, we have Tradewind Survival, which is also tier 2.5. Again, another list I didn't even know existed up until we looked at this list. Never seen it put up any results.
I played against it once. I got like blown out. I can't remember what I was playing against, but it was like game one. They blew me out. They got all my permanents off the board, and then like I was like, okay, I just need to play around survival and Tradewind Rinder, and then I did. Like it's too slow, but it can definitely steal some games. Like there's gonna be some games where it just takes over the board, controls everything, and then can bounce all your permanents. But better survival decks are one we'll get to in a little bit, and Full English Breakfast are just better.
Yeah. And then following Tradewind Survival, we have Turbo Oath at 1.5, which is definitely, in my opinion, the best Oath list.
Yep, I agree. And the deck is very resilient. Like it's basically like, and it's got the redundancy, like 4 Horn of Greed, 4 Oath, 4 Gush, 4 Intuition, usually 4 Counterspell, 4 Leak, 4. I think it runs Cunning Wish. Like it's very consistent at what it's doing. It's awesome that it's like it plays Time Warp, and then like you can just like lock the game out with like the Gaia's Blessing loop and like seeing your deck, and it's very good. I think it's the best Oath deck as well. Besides Reanimator bringing it out of the sideboard, I think it's the best one.
Yeah. Following Turbo Oath, we have Blue Green Madness, which we put at tier 2. Sorry, Roland Chang. It's not a bad deck. It's a tempo deck. It's maybe one of the decks that would get as close to Delver as it possibly could without, obviously having access to it. It just doesn't have a lot in terms of its finishing ability. Not having access to burn doesn't give it like the top end to be able to just bolt your opponent's face or clear the way for your creatures.
That's the thing. It's like
Circular Logic's a great counter spell. It's, arguably better than Mana Leak, but it can only go so far.
Yeah, the times I've played it, it's like you can like get those early threats, like the turn 1 Careful Study, put a Basket Root Wall in play. Turn 2 like Mongrel, like it's just like those starts like are strong, but like it's just like not good enough to what some of the other decks are doing, and then like you just can't like come back from it. Like I think you need to run Winter Orb and Blue Green Madness. That's how I built the list I'm playing. For the Gauntlet, I put Winter Orb because I think you need to play it.
It makes sense. I mean, being able to cheat out free or very undercosted creatures and while restricting everyone's mana is probably the way to go, especially when you're discarding and taking advantage of the madness mechanic with stuff like Circular Logic and Deep Analysis. You don't need a ton of resources to operate.
Exactly. And I got rid of I took out Arrogant Worm, like because of that, like just like you don't want, you're going to have the top end mana. You want to be tapping yourself out. But like you said, like low to the ground, early threats, and then Winter Orb. Seems pretty good. But again, I don't think it's like, it just doesn't push the tier past the tier 2 level. Nick, you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
What's next?
Right. Following Madness, we have Welder Survival, which we put at tier 1.5. I know when we were talking about it, we felt that this is probably the best survival list, or one of like the top 2, maybe next to Full English Breakfast. It's very, very strong. Recently, it's also put up a ton of results.
Yeah, it's posting a lot. And then, I mean, Goblin Welder is underplayed, but it like fits so good in like Devourer and Welder Survival. Like it's such a good card. Like when you get that going, it's like hard to interact with.
I think I'm going to take credit for this because I said in one of our last episodes that Welder needed to see more play. So I'm gonna assume everybody heard me and they were like, "Hey, we're gonna make Evan feel real good, and we're gonna play Welder for the next month."
Yes.
So thanks everybody out there. I appreciate it.
Boosting the ego. What's our next deck?
Following Welder Survival, we have White Weenie, which we put at tier 2.5. Unfortunately, it's just not good. You
No.
are losing a lot of stuff. I mean, you could pair it with black, and then you have access to Duress and Cabal Therapy. You could pair it to blue. You have access to Meddling Mage and Mana Leak and accumulated knowledge, whatever it is. You have so much there. You just don't have a lot locking yourself in mono white.
Yeah, there's a guy that built a mono white. I think it's Cleric's deck. I played against him in the monthly. I got really lucky because the only reason I won is I top decked Anarchy game 3. I think I drew it, or I had it in my opener game 2 because I knew I needed it when I was playing Goblins. But it's very hard to interact with. It's just like, I can't remember exactly how the deck wins, but it's like probably the best White Weenie deck out there. There was like a Savannah Lions version, but this deck is really good. I don't know if it's better than tier 2.5, but White Weenie, you're just lacking too much like support.
Well, unfortunately, when you're starting to get into like those mid-rangey, so if you're in the aggro, you're compared to Sly. If you're in the mid-range, you're compared to the Rock and Goblins. And unfortunately, both of those decks are just drastically better.
Yep, no, absolutely. Kind of going to the next deck, which is a little worse than its better suit. What do you got?
Yeah. We have Bant Threshold, which we put at tier 2.5 as well. It's, again, just one of those things where, I understand innovation and wanting to try to touch on stuff. And I feel like this is just a worse version of other Threshold type decks.
Yeah. We can move on. I just think blue-green, the blue-green one is just better, more consistent. Like, is it worth it for, like, I guess if you're going to run Mother of Ruins or Swords, like maybe, but your mana base is getting a little risky.
Not to say, and that this also does not include the Bant Mystic Enforcer control deck. That's something completely different, which did not make it on this list, but that would, in my opinion, be the better version of Bant, for the record.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like just like the control deck that basically plays with the 5 mana Mystic Enforcer and like no, I got you.
And then following Bant Threshold, we have Zombie Infestation, which we put at tier 2.5 as well.
Yeah, this deck is sick if it gets going, but it's just like, again, you got to talk about consistency. If you don't have the pieces, you're not going to be able to pull out the game or like do what you need to be doing.
Yeah. I love Zombie Infestation as a card. I think it's super sweet. I would love to see somebody be able to pull a deck off with it. Unfortunately, there's no Bloodghasts in this format. There's no Grave Crawlers in this format where that, squeezing that extra value out of your cards you just don't have access to. And it makes it very difficult in here. Like I said, any deck that's operating on a mid-range, axis is going to be compared to stuff like Goblins and the Rock where they're just doing it better.
No, exactly. We have 3 decks left.
We do.
This is crazy. We're coming to the end here. What's the next one?
So the next one is just actual tribal zombies, which we put at tier 2. It's a deck that I don't think has a ton of results. I don't think there's a ton of people playing it, which is obviously why. It is probably one of the most consistent tribal decks. It has a recursion, it has lords, it has the big thing that we talked about previous also is that it has Withered Wretch. There's not a lot of main board graveyard hate in this format, and this deck gets to run that while also just continuing with their own tribal game plan, which is huge. I think, in all honesty, that's the only reason this deck is even playable, is because of Withered Wretch existing.
Yeah, probably. Some decks like survival decks might run one on the side. One on the main board, which they can do, but like it's running 4, and that really helps. You got like the Lord of the Undead and Gempalm like loot. You can kind of get going, but yeah, I agree with you. I think if Withered Wretch wasn't a zombie, the deck might not even be playable.
Yeah, I think if that didn't have the creature type zombie, then
Yep.
this deck is either 2.5 or not even on the list. It's that far down.
Yeah, no, I agree. Zombies is pushing 1.5. Like the times I've played it and we've played it, like it's consistent, but mono black like you just lack some of the like you know dealing with an enchantment, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
Like
Which unfortunately with Enchantress being one of the best decks in the format, you're gonna play it, potentially often, and not having any way to interact with it is a problem.
yeah, the only way you can win is you have to just hope they don't get rid of your Lord of the Undead and Gem Palm loot. Like you just have to hope they don't, or like Shepherd of Rock can get you there. That's the only way you can win.
Yeah.
Again, you can't beat Elephant Grass.
Which I think Shepherd of Rot would at least dodge the Ivory Mask on the sideboard. I don't think Polluter does.
Oh no, it does. You're right. You're right. Yeah. Because each player is from Shepherd of Rock. Polluter, if they land the Ivory Mask, you're in big trouble too.
You're done.
That's not leaving the board.
Nope. And then they also have Elephant Grass, which is, ooh.
Yeah, it's not going to be a good time. Nick, you play black. I mean, you have no outs to it, right?
No, if they resolve those cards against you, you're probably just dead. This deck does have the ability to kind of get around them, as you said, with like Shepherd of Rot, but I don't think that's enough to push you past that. I think you still wind up dying.
Following zombies, we have we actually have two versions of Zoo. We have 5-color Zoo first, which we put at tier 2.5. Like I said, if you're a mid-range deck or an aggressive deck, you're compared to some of the best decks in the format. And unfortunately, I don't even really understand what you gain by adding 5 colors, but it's not worth it. No matter what it is, it's not worth it.
No, definitely not.
Unless there's some combo, but there's not.
No.
Yeah, this isn't a combo deck. This is just a 5-color Zoo. It feels like you don't have the mana in this format to be attempting something so ambitious.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, we don't have dual lands, which is good. Don't bring them anywhere near this.
Yeah, no.
And then we don't have we don't have all 10 fetches. So you're not going to clean out that mana base.
And then following that version of Zoo, we have Jund Zoo, which we all felt was a better version of Zoo because there's surprise less colors, and we put it at tier 2. And I also know that inherently inside of that, there is also multiple versions of that Zoo archetype for Jund as well. I know there's a Grow Jund Zoo using Quirion Dryad, and then I believe there's also some versions that are not using Quirion Dryad that are just straight Jund Zoo. Like I said earlier, and I keep reiterating, I'm sorry, is just you're being compared to other better mid-range decks or aggressive decks, depending on which version you're playing, which axes you're trying to operate the deck on, and that's what keeps it this low.
Yep. Well, gentlemen, we've come to the end of the list. This is now the tier list. And there's no change in it.
Nope.
If anyone needs to consult the pre-modern tier list, you use this.
I'm sure there's going to be some people that are very heated.
Yeah, I know.
Because look, their favorite deck is, let's say, Fluctuator, and that's their pet deck, and that's their favorite deck. And hey, you put my favorite deck in tier 2.5. What are you doing?
I'm like, oh yeah, well, Devour combo is better.
Yeah, well, we were not very kind to a lot of these decks, and for good reason. There's just a lot of decks in the format that are, I don't want to say bad. Any of these decks could probably put up really good results. It's just some of them are less consistent than definitely our tier 1 choices.
Absolutely. No, we again, everything is opinionated. It doesn't matter if it's a tier list. Anything is opinionated. Everyone's going to have different opinions on stuff, but I think this is pretty consistent with 3 of us. Like we all had different opinions. Like it's not like we all agreed on it. We went with the voting strategy since there's 3 of us. That's how we came to conclusions. We used results along with like, had we played the deck or played against it? or have we just seen the deck perform? Like if we watched coverage, like I think it's pretty consistent. You can play around here and there between like the tier 1.5 and 2, and then between tier 2 and tier 2.5, but it looks pretty consistent to me. And so what is that? There's like 6 tier 1, 8 tier 1.5. Like, so we got 14 decks that basically are like in that tier 1 or 1.5 range. Like, that's pretty good. I don't think you find that in any other format out there.
No, definitely not. There are plenty of times in like Modern where you've had 2 decks that are actually playable, and then the rest of it's just like not even worth showing up with.
Yeah, I hear. I know we don't play. None of us play Standard anymore, but I hear that the Standard's been the past few years, like since they brought Fire in. Like there's only like 1 or 2 decks. Like that sounds terrible.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing as well. A Standard has like 2 decks that you play, and that's all that you play. If you bring anything else to a tournament, you won't even top it.
Yeah, but same with like established formats like Legacy and Vintage. You have like the 3 to 5 decks that are like the tier 1, and then you get like the tier, like you get the drop off. Like they're not even 1.5. But all right, no, sweet. This is awesome. I think one last thing we wanted to touch on, just because, when Frantic Search was unbanned, and then I think that Martin, the creator of the format, mentioned like they were going to keep an eye on Devourer. Now that I've been playing it a ton, you guys have watched my games, played with it, played against it. Not just talking about that specifically. Nick, we'll start with you. Would you ban anything? Because we all agreed unanimously before we wouldn't. But Nick, would you ban anything, or would you have a watch list?
So I don't necessarily think anything needs to get banned right now. I think the format's pretty healthy. I don't think there's any one card that is too oppressive to deal with. You could continue to watch Devour, but I do feel that there are cards to deal with Devour. They're just not played. I believe we were discussing before, Nullrod is underplayed in sideboards. If more people were running that card, I think Devour would be a lot less prevalent than it is, or people wouldn't see it as oppressive because they would figure out that that's just how you deal with it.
Okay, no, I like that. So wait, so you would say don't ban anything, maybe watch Devour. Would you pick Devour itself or a different card to maybe watch?
I mean, you don't even need to necessarily watch Devour. You could watch Tinker instead, because the real weight behind the deck comes from Tinker. You can power out the Devour, just hard cast it, and the dynamic of the deck totally changes.
Yep. No, I like your outlook. All right, Evan, what do you got? Would you ban anything? And if not, do you have a watch list?
I wouldn't say that there's anything that warrants a ban. I mean, there's nothing oppressive. There's not based off of results and deck lists and stuff. It's not like there's one deck that's kind of squeezing the life out of the format here. There is no, Caw-Blade, so to speak. That's just like, well, look, 8 copies of Caw-Blade, let's go. Which shows the health of the format. Again, I would probably agree with Nick though in saying that Devour might be the card to watch because it's one of the hardest cards to interact with on a somewhat. I think that there is already been a slight shift in the meta for Devour to the point where it might start to kind of backslide to 1.5 as cards like Nullrod and Curse Totem see more and more play in sideboards. As that continues to happen, I think Devour needs to be on the watch list less and less. So
yep, no,
that would pretty much be it. I don't really think there's anything else. I mean, maybe there's like watch Replenish because it might make green white Enchantress too strong, or like you can't ban Enchantress's presence or Argothian Enchantress. I mean, you don't want to neuter the deck that hard. So, and also if you did decide to get rid of Replenish, then you also just completely nuke blue-white Opalescence Replenish. Like that deck no longer exists. We've talked about the fact that it can't operate without its graveyard. So I don't know if that would necessarily be healthy.
Yeah, no, I like your outlook there, and I like the replenish take. But again, you wouldn't want to kill like the opalescence or panda burst versions, like with replenish. Yeah, I wouldn't ban anything. The format is very balanced, and then for watching something, just playing Devour and like playing against it, like it's easy to hate on. So I don't even think I'd watch anything. Maybe something though out of Enchantress, because there's times you like don't play the game. Like it's a little annoying, but it's not like over dominating where it's like, oh, something has to get done. But I don't even know what card you would hit. If it's not replenished, what would you hit?
That's what I mean. Like you can't take there's so much stuff in there that you can't really take a key card that would like set it back that much. There's no defining card for it aside from like the enchantresses, which you can't really get rid of.
Yeah, you can't ban like or go with the Enchantress. You can't. It's like not a card you ban. Like I like the piece would have to be like replenished, like you said, but like that would be devastating. It would be annoying to lose replenish as a deck.
And I feel like even if you were going to go after a card like Elephant Grass, so that like you kind of open up the matchup for like aggro or mid-range decks, then they just run blue and just run propaganda instead.
Oh yeah. Yeah, one thing that's like a little annoying is like I'm glad Force of Will is not in it, but like against Enchantress, like you could like Tranquil Domain or Reverent Silence all their stuff away, and it's like, well, wait, they can just have replenish and it's over. So you got to like bring in the Tormods. Like there's so much you have to bring in. Like
Yeah.
if Enchantress was played more, it'd probably be one of the best decks. Like that's why we put it in tier 1 because it's so strong, it's so consistent, it's resilient. I just don't know what I would pick. But I would maybe watch something from Enchantress just because. But again, I don't even know what that would be. It could be something subtle like I don't know if you maybe possibly look at what's the I would have to look at the list. Maybe we can talk about this again. I don't know what you can hit, but like you saying replenish is probably the biggest culprit, but I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, it would, and like I said, even without replenish, the deck still operates. It's perfectly fine.
Well, I'm just
it
happy.
just doesn't give it the recursion factor.
Yeah, no, exactly. And again, I'm just happy. Like, again, we talked about it. Force of Will, the dual lands. Like, I'm glad they're not in here. The only thing that would be interesting is if like they allowed the other 5 fetch lands. Like that would clean up mana bases, but don't really care if they're in or not because I think like the mana bases are just kind of fine as is.
I mean, all that would basically do if they added in the other fetches from Zendikar is it would basically just push out pain lands for the most part.
Oh, yeah.
You would push out, the Adakar Wastes, you would push out, Shivan Reef, stuff like that. I don't think aside from that, I don't think it would make 3-color decks drastically better.
Absolutely. Well, wait, Martin, if you're listening, don't ban anything. And if you are, you're probably you are smarter than us. Look at Green White Enchantress because something is up. All right, we're telling you, just there's something there where it's like so strong, and people might be like, oh no, like that deck's fine, like it's standstill is the problem. Like it is not the problem. Again, the format is fine, but if there were to be one thing to watch, I think it's something out of Enchantress. The deck is so strong and consistent.
I mean, all it takes is a slight meta shift. People start running either more graveyard hate with their enchantment hate, or even something like Aura of Silence. You stick an Aura of Silence on turn 3, Enchantress is going to be slowed way down.
No, it's true. It has that same issue that like Devour will have. You hit Curse Totem or Null Rod, like they're going to be the game plan changes. Like so, I don't know. Not to hate on Enchantress, but it is so good and consistent.
Well, the nice part about Aura of Silence is it also hates on a lot of other stuff in the format, like Mud.
Yep.
They
can't beat it.
No, you get like a nice kind of coverage with a card like that in your sideboard.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, I think this wraps it up. Nick, it was great having you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Evan, great job. I think we're gonna look to do this like a month from now, and we'll get a nice little topic going. But we wanted to cover the tier list and then just like a B&R discussion quickly because one, people love lists. So, and I think a tier list is very like it helps solidify things and it's like nice to look at. And then ban and restricted announcements. Who doesn't love to talk about that all the time? So, all right, cool. Do you guys have anything else to add?
Well, apparently, because people are listening to me and running Welder, I want the next thing to be, guys, let's all run Quarian Dryad and Lava Dart. Think about it, guys. Just think about it. There's something there.
Nick, in case they don't want to listen to Evan anymore, do you have anything random?
Nothing in particular, no. But just thank you for having me. This was absolutely wonderful.
Awesome. Yeah, it's hard to outbeat Evan. He's a visionary at this point.
He is, yes. He started Welder.
Warping
You know what?
form.
I'll embrace it. Welders, I claim it. It's mine.
Yeah. All right, sweet guys. I guess we'll talk soon.
Yeah.
Later,
Have a good one.
everybody.